Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Copa Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Joyce, and I'm delighted that Jessica Frota has returned. And you're going to see more of her. She's been part of the furniture for a while, but she's going to jump on for at least one episode per month to talk everything Brazil, the league, the news, everything which is going on. So, Jess, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's wonderful and a big honor to be a part of this wonderful podcast. So again, thank you and thank you to the listeners as well.
Absolutely. Always thank the listeners. I should do that more, shouldn't I? So, Jess, you've done that for me. A little bit of admin before we start off with this new episode. The Club World Cup guide, which we're producing, will be available to pre-order within the next couple of weeks. So excited to get that out there. It's been about a year since we've done our last magazine, something completely different this time, but we've got 25 experts covering all the teams. So keep an eye out for that drop in across our socials. So let's dive straight into the episode. We'll park that for now. And there's so much to talk about in this episode, but there's one man we have to lead with, Jess, and that is Carlo Ancelotti, who is
Oof.
leaving Real Madrid. Hasn't yet officially been confirmed that he will be the new Brazilian manager, but it's something Brazilian fans have been waiting for maybe 18 months, maybe even longer. It was the
Yeah.
original plan once Chichi left after disappointing in Qatar World Cup. Since Fernando Diniz came in, he was dealt a bad hand. Dorival Jr. never really won the respect from the fans or the team as we saw at Copa America. And Brazil have just been trudging along in qualifiers ever since. And 2026 looked like it's so far away from Brazil, but now potentially with the Don Carlo Ancelotti coming in charge, that changes everything, doesn't it, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, okay, listen, here in Brazil, there's been obviously a lot of criticism to CBF, so the Brazilian Federation. It's been a constant under this presidency, and you had, if you around Brazilian journalism and sports and football, you would have seen Ronaldo Fenomeno. He tried to take part in politics, but then the politics spoke a lot, and he was basically boycotted, and because he wanted to implement a lot of changes to how the federation works, and every single Brazilian that follows the sport was rooting for him and excited about his propositions and everything, and it didn't work. And so there's a lot of stagnation within the federation right now, and it's we have a disconnect, something that as a Brazilian I can say it's like you don't feel like it's going to get worse, but then it does get worse. And as someone that grew up with Brazil winning the World Cup and being this huge thing where the entire country stops when Brazil is playing, to go through this phase right now that we're in, it's been kind of weird, and it led a lot of people like very disillusioned with the sport. And then to suddenly have this glimmer of hope of getting such a huge name, a name that obviously some of our best players. Also, as a Chelsea fan, fantastic manager for Chelsea, fantastic manager for Real Madrid, just a winner all around with Milan and everything. And I think he also embodies that freedom of just allowing the players to perform, and the attacking players, we saw Vini Jr. thrive under him. And so there's just this glimmer of hope that despite everything and going wrong with the federation and the politics and all of it, we might end up with someone that can kind of bring us that glimmer of hope again, and that belief in the national team again. And so, I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop and for something to, maybe it won't work out, but the hope is there. And if it does, and I think the impact that having him as the manager will have on the fans before even Brazil kicked a ball under him will be immense, of just people backing him and wanting to believe in the national team again. And also the impact for the players, the players themselves believing that we can achieve something with the national team again. And it's just, yeah, I'm hopeful. I don't want to be, but I'm very, very hopeful that it's going to work out and that we're going to have him as manager.
No, I completely agree with you. And the whole Vinicius Jr. for Real Madrid and then Vinicius Jr. for Brazil, it's just been chalk and
Yeah,
cheese, as we say in England, right, it's completely different with his performances. Having Ancelotti there to bring the best out of him, I think that's where your potential hope comes from, right? And also alongside Rodrigo as well. I think Endrick will probably be the only player who would be a little bit upset about the situation, because he'll probably go down the pecking order a little bit. But it'd be so
Yeah, I'm not
interesting.
sure. I'm not sure,
Okay.
to be honest with you. I'm not sure, but just because, I mean, obviously you're talking about club football, so he has a lot of options, right? Has like Kylian Mbappe and other names, but
Mm,
if you look at Brazil right now at number 9, he has a few options, but maybe it won't be as bad for Hendrik as some people think. We'll have to wait and see.
potentially. I just came at it from
Yeah,
a negative point of view, but it'll be
yeah,
interesting
yeah,
to
yeah.
see, right? Esteval, Andre Santos, who we've spoken about many
Yes.
times on the podcast.
Mm.
Ancelotti may just change what we've been seeing over the last 18 months, because their squad selection sometimes, especially under Dorival Jr., has been quite bizarre. So for Ancelotti to come in and take over for Brazil in the next year leading up to the World Cup will be very exciting, because before I just couldn't see it being anything but a car crash for the Brazilian national team. So you're getting a slight insight what it's like to be an Englishman for so many years, and you've only had a short snippet of how bad it actually is. So look, we'll park international chat there, and we'll
Yeah.
stick with the theme of managers, because last time we spoke, Jess, we were like, oh, the Brazilian league is growing. All the X, Y, and Z players are coming back. Like, you've got Neymar, you've got Memphis Depay, etc. There's so much talent within Brazil, but the one problem still with Brazil, maybe a European audience can't understand this. I mean, we're close to Brazil and we probably can't understand it still, but the amount of managers that are
Yeah.
being sacked, and it's like a merry-go-round, which happens in Brazil each and every year. We could even say each and every week, because after 4 rounds in Brazil's top flight, 4 managers have been sacked already. You have Corinthians' Ramon Diaz, Fluminense's Mano Menezes, Santos's Pedro Casinha, Gremio's Gustavo Quinteros as well, and there probably will be a couple more in the next couple of weeks. Jess, it's a head scratcher, isn't it? And
Yeah.
off the podcast, you and I talk quite a bit about what's going on in Brazil, and you highlighted a really interesting interview with Pep Guardiola, and he was interviewed about the turnover in Brazil when it comes to managers. I'll hand the microphone over to you if you want to talk through that a little bit. I don't want to steal your thunder, but
No,
it's,
no, go ahead, go ahead.
well, look, Pep Guardiola was interviewed. I can't remember who was doing the interview. Maybe you can help me out with that. I can't remember who did it.
I think it was, was it from TNT? I think it was from TNT, no?
Potentially, yeah. That was a
From,
small
yeah, I
detail.
think it
I'm
was
not
from
sure what.
Fred Caldeira. Yeah, I think it was Fred Caldeira from TNT.
Yeah, and they was interviewing Pep Guardiola, obviously one of the best managers ever, about Brazil's situation, where if you don't win 2 or 3 games in a row, automatically you are fired as your job, fired from your job rather. And Pep Guardiola was there to sort of say, well, yeah, that makes sense as to why there's no progression with these clubs, because even looking at the early stages of the season, where you jump straight back into Brazil Serie A, you have Copa do Brazil, Libertadores, Sudamericana. You can play 3, 4, 5 games in a 2-week period. Now, you use your state cups before the season to prepare yourselves for the tournaments ahead. Now, if your style of football doesn't work straight away, you have such limited time on the training pitch, because you're flying to different countries, you're coming back for the cup. 2 days later, you're traveling again in Brazil. It's not like the UK where you can just get train or fly for an hour or two. Like, these are long journeys. And if you're heading back from, say, Peru or Chile after a 2-3-0 loss in Sudamericana or Libertadores, and then straight back on the road in Brazil, and you lose that, fans are almost saying, well, we need a change of manager. They need to leave. This isn't working. And
Yep.
I can't make my mind up, Jess, but sometimes with it, is it the pressure of the fans towards the board? Is it poor
Yeah.
decisions from the board? Brazil is progressing massively on the pitch, right? We can agree with that. But then are young players potentially being hindered because of the lack of Brazilian managers at the moment? Because the managers who are sacked just seem to rotate into another team and trying to fix their situation. It doesn't seem to work. But if you lose 2 or 3 games that's football, right? We're here, we understand, but in Brazil, there doesn't seem to be that understanding. You can either agree or disagree with me there.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely a cultural thing. It's been that way since I was a newborn. It hasn't changed. I honestly don't think it will change like as a whole in terms of a mentality for a few years at least. What I will say is that when you're talking about European football and you have a preseason, right? And so you usually see in the preseason sometimes you have a terrible preseason in terms of results, but you can have glimpses of how the team wants to play and all of that. And then when it starts the season, you somehow see a shift. Not somehow, but you usually see a shift of how the team starts playing, whether it's because the manager finally has every player available to him, or he actually took the time of the preseason to build a squad, to entrust his style and to teach and coach the players to start the season strong. In Brazil, that kind of doesn't happen because if you're talking about preseason, it's very limited. Usually, you have the state championship, so each state in Brazil has their own championship before the national league starts, and so by the time the national league starts, fans are either really behind the manager or really fed up with the manager. And it's very interesting because if you're talking, I'm already going to jump a few things, but I like to highlight Palmeiras. Palmeiras, um, when in the state championship, they were a car crash. They were absolutely awful. They got destroyed by Corinthians. They were the much better team in terms of players at that disposal, in terms of squad, and they just didn't perform. I don't remember a single good performance from Palmeiras when you're talking about another big club. And then the league starts, and they have players joining. They have everybody fit finally. Flaco Lopes really kind of pushing, and Victor Roque finally understanding himself with Stevão. And so you have Palmeiras start the league very, very strongly. But what would happen with a lot of clubs by then is that because the whole thing pre the league was hurtful, but for the fans, or because they lost to their rivals, the patient would be very thin. And so by the time the league starts, if you lose two in a row, then heads will roll. And so that's just a cultural thing. And I do understand to I think to an extent, if you're talking about Mano Menezes, for instance, with Fluminense, he is someone that by the time he was appointed, there were a lot of eyebrows raised because just of how he likes to set up. He seems very conservative, and you're talking about Fluminense, who uses a lot of the academy, and it just didn't seem like a right fit. So in that sense, I would argue it was more of a error in terms of the hierarchy and the appointment of the manager. But in other cases, it's just a lack of patience from the fans, from the board, and it is very much a cultural thing. On the other hand, you can point to good, impactful managers that had a longer run. Obviously, with Palmeiras, although I would say with an asterisk because Abel, since the moment he came,
Mm.
he won a lot of trophies, so it's far easier to have patience with him. But then you point to Fortaleza, my rivals, because having a manager who was given time and support from the board, with the players that he wanted and the time to really implement his style, and now their fans are getting the rewards in terms of their qualifications to Libertadores and how well Fortaleza has been doing in the first division. So it's one where you have to think of, okay, if you really trust that you have the right manager, as I would say Flamengo has now with Felipe Luis as well, then you have to give them time to really implement that style. I know Diniz didn't have a good time with Brazil national team. I was very disappointed in him, but with Fluminense it was kind of the same. He needed, because of his style, very much having control of the ball, and everybody needs to know where they have to be, and just recycling the ball of this all of the time. He is a type of manager that kind of demands two or more seasons to really implement his style, and then obviously they won Libertadores with that. So with certain managers, you have to understand where they're coming from and what they need to achieve their goal. But also, as I said, it's a cultural thing. So it's almost like the board will say, okay, I will there's a big name out on the market, so I'm just going to hire them. If it doesn't work out, we're going to sack them, and you're going to know, there doesn't seem to be overall, I'm talking about overall throughout all the clubs. Obviously there are exceptions. I would say Fortaleza is one of them, but overall there doesn't seem to be that concern about going for the name that really fits the squad and really fits what the board want to achieve, and have the similar goals. It's almost like it's disposable. They know that they can get a big name and everybody will shut up because it's a big name, even though the squad is not built for how the manager want to play. And so they start building the squad, and then the manager goes and another manager comes in that the squad isn't built for. So it is a bit frustrating. As I said, there are certain instances where it's completely understandable. I would say, again, Monument is one of them. But as I would say, it is a problem, not so much about the sacking, but about, as I said, the fact that there doesn't seem to be a conscious decision behind who they are appointing.
I think you summed it up perfectly. And what I've seen this season, maybe it's a unique example, but if we look at Sao Paulo with Luis Zabeldia, now they drew their first 4 games of the season, which was quite bizarre, but fans almost wanted him out. He drew 0-0 against Sport Recife on the first game, 0-0, despite missing a penalty and stuff, and fans were calling him a donkey and stuff like this, and wanted him out. But the reason why he's kept his job, which I know sounds ridiculous to people who don't follow Brazilian football that closely, the reason why he hasn't lost his job at the moment is because there are a lack of Brazilian managers out there in the market to replace them, apart from the ones that are being sacked. And as you said there, like, it seems to be a case of, we'll look for a big name on the market, Dorival Jr., Chichi, etc., and see if we'll just bring them in. And people listening to that, and even when I listen to you now, because sometimes I'm a little bit too close to it, but then what you just said there, you just hit the nail on the head. It was perfect in terms of, look, there's a big name available on the market, we'll get them in. But what are the tactics? And if you think about how I kicked off this chat, was such a limited time on the training pitch during the busy periods of the season. I'll say during the busy periods, the whole season is hectic from the first game, isn't it? How on earth do you even get time to implement your strategies on the pitch and work with these youngsters? And that's the way I'm sort of coming at it in terms of players coming through the academies and stuff. Like, how are they meant to settle? Because you'll see glimpses of their talent, then they're exported to Europe, but without any particular guidance. I know I've spoken about him previously on the podcast, but you think about Matheus Franca, who obviously left Flamengo for Crystal Palace, and he's really struggled to find his feet because he probably didn't have sort of the right coaching behind him. They just saw promise and brought him over to a big league, and then it hasn't worked out for him straight away. So cause for concern for me. But I think my question to you, Jess, is it's a big question, but how does Brazil go about fixing this particular issue? Because apart from Felipe Luis at the moment for Flamengo, who we're making a huge song and dance about, he's doing great things at Flamengo, but maybe we're talking about him being the next best manager or linked with the Brazilian job already, is because there's just a lack of young talent coming through at the moment. So how is that problem resolved without just recycling names we see over and over again?
Yeah, as I said, it is a vicious cycle. It is something that has been this way since I was a newborn. So I genuinely do not see it changing soon. I think the biggest change that we saw in recent years has been managers outside of Brazil coming in. So especially from Portugal or from other countries in South America. And they do bring this new vision of football that helps, and it allow them to stay longer on the job because they offer something different to the league, and so you get results. But I think it has to be a mixture of managers coming through, trying to really, I'm going to say this word, I don't want to sound hard, for like educate themselves in terms of traveling abroad, learning new things, and trying not to stay stuck in the past. And I think that has been one of the many reasons why Felipe Luis has been so successful, in terms of he really prepared himself. He has that eye for coaching. He always had, since he was a player way back then, but he worked under the best, and then he really put himself through the steps of learning in Europe and then learning from people in South America, and just having that vision broaden. I think that's important. So it is an individual thing in terms of wanting to change, right? To not think that, oh, I'm a big name in Brazil. That's okay. That's enough. But it's also, again, a federation problem. It's a cultural problem. It needs to be, I think, addressed in a national setting, and it has to come from incentives from the federation. And sadly, it just doesn't happen, because there's a lot of money in Brazilian football, and for the people that are in power right now, it's okay that things are and stay the way they are because they are winning lots of money. And it's harsh to say, but sadly, it's just the reality. So it is always exciting to see when someone like Felipe Luis kind of bursts through the scene and kind of pops that bubble a little bit. And maybe it will happen more and more because we have a lot of players now, that are either looking towards coaching. You can think about Thiago Silva, who's doing a lot of work in England as well to earn his badges and trying to work through it. So, and also I would say, again, with the influences from both players and managers from other countries, I think that has been helpful. But in terms of managers from Brazil, like Brazilian names, yeah, Felipe is the one that we have our hopes on, because he really prepares himself, and also because I think how he speaks, outside of the pitch as well as on the pitch, he understands the game. He is always looking to get better. He has a connection to his fans, connection to the players. Obviously, he was a player, so he kind of has this dream of, he embodies everything out of what we want in a manager. So I think every Brazilian has that thing of, okay, in the future, he can be that guy that can be a Brazilian manager again in the national team that can, you know, take us to the next level. Obviously now we're linked with Carlos, so everybody is focusing on that. But before that, we had shouts of people, okay, go for him, take him out of Flamengo. He wouldn't, by the way, because he's very, he wants to
Too
really,
soon.
like, yeah, do things like step by step. And I think that's the right approach. But yeah, but because we're looking for someone to show something new, to show that they want to learn and to take out the shackles of the past or something. It sounds very deep, but it is what it is.
No, I completely agree with you. I feel so old when we talk about Felipe Luis and Thiago Silva now being managers, having watched them
Yeah.
throughout their careers. But maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a case of the elder managers, 50 plus, who see the game very differently to these up and coming ex-players now trying to get their coaching badges, who have sort of ended their career as the modern game is slightly changing. And maybe that's the transition we need to see. But I think, look, you're definitely right. Felipe Luis is the one who's shining that light and leading the charge. So hopefully we see a little bit more of that. Now, let's move across to the players who are trying to keep managers in the job. And let's have a little look at the early race for the golden boot and who can potentially, we'll put across a couple of our predictions perhaps for this section. But look, who's leading the charge, Jessica? Like, you need a player for, Ceara's Pedro Raul, who's on loan from Corinthians, 4 in 4, only one from the spot as well. He's been a very good poacher. I will let you talk about him in a bit more detailed, but how I see this, because look, when we did our Brazilian review a few months back, you were very much like, I'm not sure how the season's going to go. You were quite negative about it, which I understood. But if you look at Vitória and how they managed to stay up after back-to-back promotions, it was because they had Alejandro, who scored 15 goals in 34 games, and it was his goals which kept Vitória up, and he's since moved to CSK Moscow in Russia. But you just need that one player to keep you up and build foundations, and it is Raul, or Pedro Raul, for you guys. So what a wonderful start to the campaign he's had. Did you expect that at all? Because his record for Corinthians wasn't great.
No. No, I mean, I don't think anyone expected, to be honest. I think we were certain that he was much better than what we had. So we were excited with that. But I don't think anyone expected that. That wasn't the chatter in terms of the fans, and he just obviously won us over even before the league started. He is starting to find that connection with the club. that he didn't have in the early weeks. So it's just been a dream, to be honest. And now and also I would highlight he is a poacher. He finds the game. He's always at the right place at the right time, but he always tries to get involved. He's a fighter. I was at the stadium for Ceara's last game against Vasco, and you just saw him running around. By the 7 minute mark, he was like dying on the field because he had ran so much, and so it was fantastic to see. To have the whole stadium behind him, just because that's what you like to see, right? As a fan, someone who really fights, and he does that as well. So it's wonderful that we get him to score. And you're absolutely right about having that goal scorer. Ceara didn't have that since Arthur. So I think maybe European fans will know him from Benfica, Basel, and Fiorentina. So, and obviously Palmeiras, but he stood a little bit in Palmeiras, not long in Palmeiras. So he was our big name, and as a striker, he is a Ceara fan as well. So obviously that was his connection. He was the guy, and since him, we didn't have someone that was a reliable goal scorer. That even when we played badly, he would find a goal, and it feels like we have that now. And so our worry and our dread, and that what I hear people talking about in the stadium and the fans, is that another club will try to get him by the middle of the season. So that's our only concern. So our hope now is that he stays a full season to ensure that we stay in the first division. But it's been a dream, to be honest with you. We're gonna have to play outside now against Bahia, so away from home, and that's always a worry when you're talking about Ceara. But for home games, it's been fantastic. Been absolutely fantastic. So very excited. And yeah, I would say it's too soon, maybe, for Golden Boot. Also because, as I said, we are very scared about another club coming in and just taking him away. But
Just try to
oh my gosh, he
enjoy him
even
for.
finishes.
Just try and
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah,
him
but
for now. Yeah.
we are traumatized. You don't understand how traumatized we are. But yeah, it's been a dream. It's wonderful. As I said, the connection is building, and actually to see his movement on the pitch, it's really smart. It's very smart. The way he follows the move, the way sometimes he runs, and you go and go, what? Where is he going? And you hear people screaming and telling him to go to the other side, and then the ball comes exactly where he is. It's just fantastic. He's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful for Ceara, and long may it continue.
100%. And look, let's move across from sort of one Pedro to another, because Flamengo's Pedro is back, which is
Yeah.
great to see. Okay, after doing his second ACL, he got back into the Brazilian national team and then did his ACL in the training before the match. He didn't even get back on the pitch for Brazil. That's happened twice, but the way in which he's bounced back, they said it could be 8-9 months, and it's been 6 months. And then I was quite skeptical as to how he was going to come back. Yeah, he scored a brace in half an hour,
Great.
missed a penalty against Juventus in
Yeah.
that 6-0 win, and he looked like he'd never been away, or he looked like he was either never been away, or he was just desperate to get back on the pitch and showcase what he could do, because his 2024 campaign was a joke. It was absolutely ridiculous. He scored 11 goals in the league in 21 appearances, was injured for the last 3 months of the season, and only missed out on the Golden Boot by 4 goals, which is just a crazy stat. He scored, I think it was 35 goals in 45 appearances across all competitions. He was leading the charge, and he got back into the Brazilian national team. Whether Ancelotti turns towards him, I'm not 100% sure. But if he continues the record which he picked up last season, I mean, that Golden Boot looks like it could easily be his. And if we look in behind with Flamengo, like, it's just a team of superstars, isn't it? In terms of
Yeah.
Gerson, De La Cruz, Giorgian de Arrascaeta, who I want to talk about a little bit later. There's so much talent in behind, yet they need a number 9. They have Bruno Henrique, and they've brought in Juninho, who I'm quite curious about. I quite like him. I think he's been solid, but both almost playing in reserve to Pedro. And the way in which Pedro came back against Juventus was such a solid performance. He's the obvious candidate to win the Golden Boot, but
Yeah, I would agree.
I suppose my question for you, Jess, is, if we're going to go back to Brazil for the next minute or so, is would you see him, or would you like to see him in the Brazilian national team? Does he deserve that opportunity, or is his level just dominating Brazilian football domestically?
I think when you think about Pedro, at least me, I think about like more like old school. He is that type of player that I always want to have in a team, in a national team. Not even if you're talking about like national team or just the qualities that he has, that old school, just going in the box. It's good to have that player, even if you have it on the bench, to just throw around and at the very end in the crossing and all of that we are very familiar with, of those last minutes of Premier League. So I like him. I really do like him. I like what he brings to the side. I would like for him to go back to the national team, as I said, not as a starter, but to have that his attributes, because you look at the other options and they are very different in terms of what they can bring to a side than what he does. So obviously you have Endrick, you have Vitor Roque. Lately, I think we got called João Pedro as well. Even Cunha, who's not really a nine. So he is that old school nine, and just because of his attributes, I think it's very interesting to have that option. So I can only hope that he continues to go forward. And it's funny because he's very charismatic as a person. I don't know if you feel that or if you're watching interviews, he's just very charismatic. And
Mm-hmm.
even though he is a player for Flamengo, who obviously is a huge club and has a lot of rivals, I think everyone kind of likes him because of his charisma a little bit. So I think that helps as well when you're talking about national team and how it translates. So I'm really hopeful. I'm really hopeful that he can go back to his best, as you said, already a brace. I think Felipe Luis will finally get the best out of him. Really, really get the best out of him, because he was tormented with a huge injury, as you said. So yeah, just watching, it will be interesting to see how he does, and have Vitor Roque there again to see them both side to side. Even though I don't think Palmeiras depends as much on Vitor's goals as I would say Flamengo does for Pedro at the moment. But yeah, it'll be very interesting.
But that's where we saw Flamengo drop off last season, and that's why they
Yeah,
exited the Libertadores, because they didn't have Pedro. So the fact that such a big club in Brazil relies on him, maybe he has got another chance in the Brazilian national team. And I think the fact that he got called up and then was never even able to get on the pitch, he deserves that
yeah,
opportunity. So many people, he gets linked every now and again to Europe, and everyone looks at that really poor sort of Fiorentina spell.
yeah,
I think that's really harsh. What he's doing in Brazil almost deserves that opportunity. So hopefully he comes back, and that Juventus half an hour performance is what we get to see time and time again, and he stays injury free. And if he does, I think the golden boot, it may not be Pedro Raul's, but it'll probably be Pedro's,
yeah.
sadly, for you to hear. But
No, I'm okay. I'm already Pedro
oh, that's
Raul.
fine.
It's okay. He can do. He'll be fine if we stay up. Pedro Raul. I'm not going to get him
Mm.
his tattoo, but I would like to say that I would get his tattoo.
If he wins you the World Cup, then potentially that's a conversation we can have in a
Yeah,
year's time. One before we get into our sort of ones to watch or players we've liked, it sort of makes sense if we've brought up Flamengo, we've brought up Pedro, and I've already mentioned him, but the player in behind, well, who should be assisting Pedro, but he's actually leading the charge already with 4 goals of his own, is de Arrascaeta, who's 30 years of age, so he's probably not going to be making a move back to Europe or to a European team. He's going to stay there for Flamengo, but a player worth bringing up and keeping an eye on for the Club World Cup, because he's what makes Flamengo tick. He oozes
yeah,
so much quality in those half spaces, knows when he can drive into the box, great with set pieces. The moment he finishes, it's either really impactful or just looks quite lethargic, because he just knows he can just roll it in almost like a training session when it comes to his talents. And we spoke off the podcast, Jess, and you said that you maybe feel he's a little bit undervalued for Uruguay in the
yeah.
national team. But
100%.
For Flamengo, he's been the main man. And if Flamengo are to challenge Palmeiras for the title, it's going to be that combination of de Arrascaeta and Pedro for me. And it's going to be really interesting to see him up against some of the best European teams as well at Club World Cup. I know it's going to be a slightly different scenario, and we're still going to find our feet with this new tournament. But I think Flamengo are going to be the team who's going to maybe cause 1 or 2 surprises out of everyone. And de Arrascaeta can be at the heart of that, but he's had such a strong start to the season. Jess, I know you're a big fan as well, so I'll let you hype
Yeah,
him up a little bit as well.
yeah. I mean, he is my favorite player to watch from Flamengo. As you said, he just oozes class, absolutely fantastic. You could see when he got injured, like the drop off in quality in terms of passes and just he's just very both intuitive and imaginative. He sees the moves before they happen in his brain. I always love players like that who can create because they know what's going to happen before it happens. And so it's fantastic. As you mentioned, the national team, it was such a struggle for me to watch the Uruguayan national team and see him on the bench. And they had like Bentancur and I think Ugarte, and it just no creation in midfield. And I was like, why, what are they
Yeah.
doing? Like they have this wonderful player, and by the time that they bring him in, and he would just create like this pass out of nowhere, and they obviously immediately started playing better. And so yeah, I'm huge fan. I think if you watch Flamengo, you have to be a fan of his football, right? He's just his vision is insane. Absolutely adore him.
We've briefly touched about Palmeiras, and obviously we've spoken about Flamengo, giants of the game under Felipe Luis, with Pedro, de Arrascaeta, Gerson, the rest. Okay, so just star-studded side. We spoke on the podcast about Palmeiras spending so much money. So just before we get to our players, we pick players to watch or players we've liked at the start of the season. I just want, it's a really harsh question already. I'm throwing some difficult ones at you today, Jess, but Palmeiras, Flamengo, who do you think will pick up the title at this stage of the season?
Oh, oh no.
It's tough,
I
isn't
would
it?
say, yeah, I would. It's tough because at the same time, like Steven was going to leave after the Club World
Mm-hmm.
Cup.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're talking about this stage, but so much is going to happen after July that it's in terms of like the squad. Um, I'm very subjective because I want like Steven to win as many games as possible. So I tend to say Palmeiras. I also have a lot of family members that are Palmeiras fans, so I also tend to say them. But I really like Flaco Lopez, the way that he integrated in the side. I mean, he's scoring, finally starting, finally scoring. I like the way that Steven and him are really understanding each other. I think Victor Hockey will boom. He will break out of his shell. We haven't seen that yet with Palmeiras, and I think once it happens, like the way that they're playing will change drastically. I genuinely believe that. I will also say Palmeiras because I think they are growing, right? So as I said before the league started, they were playing terrible football, and they're finally playing to their strengths, and the individual talent is coming through, and I think they're not like in a crescendo. So I'm gonna say them, but as I said, a lot can change. I think a lot will change, not only Steven. So one to watch. Natalia, Nat won't like my answer. Obviously, she's a Flamengo fan, but
This is why I haven't
yeah,
asked her, because I know what she's going to say.
yeah,
I think it's really, really tough, and obviously so much to change in terms of so much can change. Obviously, with players coming in and out, long season. What do you prioritize? The Libertadores, Copa do Brazil as
yeah.
well. Like there's almost games every other day towards the end of the season. It was really funny because we did the Libertadores preview, and in that I said I had huge concerns about Palmeiras' defense, how they've just spent an overload
Hmm.
in the forward areas. But the defensive, and I've slated Richard Rios a few times, maybe a bit harsh. I've been a bit too harsh on him, but Richard Rios and Martinez in the middle defend as a defensive unit has worked quite well in the first 5 games of the season. And I can't really say too much about the defense because they've conceded 2 in 5 games. So a long way to go just yet. So I'm not going to put my hands up and say I was wrong just yet. I still think Palmeiras' defence could potentially catch them out. But they've been impressive so far, so I have to give them the plaudits there. But they've also spent a hell of a lot of money, so they should be up there. And Abel Ferreira knows what it takes to win a title. When he isn't moaning about the schedule anyway, like he loves to, he knows how to get his team playing. So yeah, I agree with you. Vitor Roque is going to be a really interesting one. 9 games without a goal. I don't think many people probably would have expected that. But what happened with him at Barcelona, then Betis, and then coming back across to Palmeiras, like it's going to weigh heavy on him. It's going to take him time to adapt. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going to explode at some point, and very early stages of the season. Let's sign the podcast off with a player from you, Jess, who you have been impressed with so far. I know it's been 5 or 6 games, but we like to get people
Yeah.
a bit excited and getting people tuning into Brazilian football. So
Yeah.
you propose one, I'll propose one, and then that's where we can wrap up the pod.
Yeah, I'm gonna say one that I don't think, like, from a club that I don't think many Europeans that don't follow Brazilian football will know, which is he's from Bahia, the club Bahia, and it's a left back who can also play on the left in the wing on the wings. But as someone that loves fullbacks, I absolutely adore fullbacks, and also struggled with the struggles that in the national team of not having proper fullbacks and proper left back, having watched Roberto Carlos and then Marcelo, and now, after that, not really having someone to claim that position. I'm always attentive to fullbacks in the league and trying to see who's doing well. And so I will say Bahia's left back, Juba. I think he has 3 assists and a
Yeah.
goal in 4 games
Yeah.
for Bahia, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Even though they haven't won any games, I think they drew 3 of them. They're gonna play Ceara. I'm very, very scared, by the way, in a little bit later today, because it's a away game for us, and I hope he has an awful game, by the way. But he has been very impressive. I think the quality and attack that he brings. Obviously, as I said, he plays as almost like a wing back, winger/winger there. So he has that attacking quality, but he's also very solid defensive. I think he's 25 as well, so very good age. And I think if he were playing for maybe like São Paulo, Flamengo, Palmeiras, a lot of people would be talking about him. And so right now I feel he's very underrated still. But as you said, very early on, but for the 4 games, he has been the left back of the season. So the left back, the team of the season so far, he's definitely been that fullback for me. So I'm very intrigued to keep following him and to see what he does until the rest of the season.
I love that your favourite position's fullback, because mine's defensive
Yeah.
midfield. So between us, people might think like we love boring positions on the pitch, because most people go wingers
No,
or strikers, and we're here for defensive
no.
midfielders
I mean, I
and
love
left
striker,
backs.
right? So
Yeah,
I played at striker, so number 9. But after that, like fullback, I grew up with Cafu. Come on,
yeah,
I
exactly.
have to like fullbacks, right? So
I think we've just shown so much love to like players like Andre on the podcast so many times. It's just
yeah,
molded my opinion to defensive midfielders. But the
yeah.
player I'm going to talk about isn't a defensive midfielder, isn't a fullback. It's actually a right winger who had a really impressive Copinha for Sao Paulo, who obviously went to go and win that tournament. And that is the 18-year-old Lucas Ferreira, who's been given a couple of games at the start of the season, maybe due to the fact that Oscar and Lucas Moura have been out injured and Luis Sabaldi has had to change up his tactics a little bit, whatever reason, but he's got on the pitch and played in the Libertadores and played in the league and had a really strong game against Santos in their first victory in a 2-1 victory over the weekend. But Lucas Ferreira, if we look at his profile, it fits what we have seen with exports to Europe over the last season or so. Still very raw, but I think he has similarities to Luis Guilherme in terms of big physique, likes to either take the ball down the right-hand side, bulldoze his way through, but has quite quick, sort of dainty feet in terms of working into tight areas. Happy to pull it back and use his right foot, still cut inside, still got a lot of work to do with his left foot. But his physique and his size and his pace ticks a lot of boxes. And if we think about the players who have been exported to Europe, maybe not around the physique, but the style, in terms of Gustavo Nunes, who went to Brentford. We've not seen too much of him yet. Luis Guilherme, Esteval, obviously going to Chelsea. A lot of European teams are all looking at these players who can operate on that space and cut in. Left-footed wingers who operate on the right-hand side seem to be worth their weight in gold. So he's only played 2 or 3 appearances for the senior side, still very raw, but I really like the look of his profile, and it's something which can hopefully develop. And if you think about if Oscar and Lucas Moura come back from injury, or if as and when, not if, sorry, when they come back from injury, like having those players to learn from, especially Lucas Moura, who's just dominating at this level, I think potentially he can have a great season. So yeah, it's only a few games in. Try and get people excited about someone else we've not spoken about. But one more I just want to drop out there is Ryan Vitor from Vasco, who He's 18. He made his debut at 16, and the likes of Real Madrid were looking at him. And although he's 18, I feel like I've been talking about him for quite a while now. I just want to see more from him when it comes to his output. He had 20 odd games last season in the league and just one goal, but a lot of his appearances were 10, 15 minutes there. But he's on the other side of the pitch, right? He's operating on that left wing, and he's already got a goal and assist to his name already, so he's already done better this time round than last season. But I just want to see how he can improve his confidence in the final third, almost not just letting Coutinho and Payet with the final touches or the final output, getting their goals and assists tally up. Ryan Vitor has had big clubs in Europe look at him for quite a while now, but he just needs to raise his game a little bit further. And then a team like Vasco, he can really take that team by the scruff of the neck and say, look, I'm the 18-year-old kid here, but I can take them to the Sudamericana, Libertadores, etc., and get them higher up the table. He's not like he's drowning at Flamengo in talent where potentially he's only going to get a few minutes here and there. He's being trusted this season to get quite a few minutes on the pitch. Just needs to show a little bit more in that final third. And if everything clicks and he starts getting a few goals and assists, expect plenty of clubs to be queuing around the block for him. So 2 18-year-old wingers to get excited about. So long are the days of my bringing defensive midfielders to the table. There seems to be a lack of them at the moment in Brazil, but I'm sure one or two will pop up at some point.
Yeah.
That seems a nice place to leave it. Jess, have you got anything you would like to get off your chest before we finish the pod?
Yeah, just one thing. I remember the last time that I was here, we talked a little bit about Neymar and the impact he could have for the national team,
Yes.
and how the worry was always going to be his fitness or lack thereof, and it just seems to be like confirmed over and over again. So, not sure if Carlo Ancelotti is back, what will happen there. He would probably still call him up, or how much he will play or not. But I think the hopes of him having an impact for the national team again are just dwindling and becoming less and less by the minute, unfortunately. So it just feels like his body can't take it anymore. So that's a sad note. But to end in the good note, we
Yeah,
have a lot of
let's
good
end
things
on a
coming through.
positive for sure.
Again, yeah. So you have Rodrigo and Vini with Carlo, who knows them as well, and Estevão, who's someone that we are all looking towards. So it's just it's sad, but it feels like almost it's time, to change and to have that new generation really take the national team and make it their own, right? It can't be, the thing is, it can't be more about Neymar. As the feeling before was, okay, we're all gonna work towards Neymar having that goal. But sadly, it can't be about Neymar. So it really must be the young players and the players coming through saying, okay, this is our national team and what it represents and making it their moment. It's our time now. So, and I think it can
Absolutely.
happen under a really good manager, Carlo Ancelotti, hopefully. So
It's
let's end hoping and praying that it's Uncle Carlo.
Absolutely. It's a changing of the guard, not in a way that we wanted it to happen, but with
Yeah.
Estevão on the rise, that baton is definitely being passed on to the right player. I think that's a nice way of twisting it. A sad way in which Neymar's career seems to be ending with this endless hamstring injury, which doesn't seem to be getting any better. Maybe he was rushed back.
Yeah.
The amount of games which happened in Brazil. But as we've said many a times on this podcast, the future is bright with Estevão, and maybe that's the way in which we can leave the podcast this week. So,
Yeah.
look, thank you very much for your time, Jess. Thanks for listening. Jess will be back within the next month to review more action happening in Brazil. So do subscribe to the podcast across Apple, Spotify, and YouTube for free, and we will see you on the next episode.